Jake had suffered from migraines throughout his life, with some episodes being particularly debilitating. His last attack occurred over a year ago, and he was grateful for every day without a migraine. It can be challenging to convey the intensity of a severe migraine to someone who has not experienced it. Prolonged pain and suffering can lead to a profound sense of longing for death. The desire for relief can be overwhelming, and the individual may feel a need for the world to end and for them to die in peace. A migraine of that level was rare for Jake, but he recognized the importance of paying attention to his body and resting when it started. He had learned over his 35 years that despite his large muscular frame, a migraine could incapacitate him. On Wednesday morning, he recognized the early signs: double vision, dizziness, and a slight throbbing in his head. He knew he couldn't risk driving, so he ordered a taxi to get home. He informed his secretary that he would cancel his meetings for the day and that he would inform her later if he would be at the office the next day. These headaches could last a week, and he didn't want to take any chances. He returned home and took 2 pills. He procured an ice pack and proceeded directly to the living room, which was situated adjacent to their spacious master bedroom in the corner. He had a chair that he utilized on such infrequent occasions. He could place the ice pack on his head, close his eyes to block out the light, and simply attempt to meditate mindlessly. He perceived the pain to intensify. He placed the ice pack on his head, closed his eyes, and attempted to relax. He then turned off the light in the living room and drew the curtains. He remained in this position for approximately 2 hours. It appeared that this migraine would not be as severe as he had initially feared if he was fortunate to be able to function in a couple of hours. He heard some sounds downstairs and assumed it was his wife with whom he had lived for 10 years. He decided to remain seated, as he was not yet ready for a conversation. Linda was familiar with his condition and had learned to leave him alone until his attack passed. She always tried to be quiet and let him rest when she knew he was home. Apparently, Linda was unaware that Jake was home, as his car was not in the driveway. Additionally, he had no reason to be home, as he typically returned every evening at 6 o'clock. Jake was able to block out the noise and continue his meditation to control the pain. However, he suddenly realized that Linda was not alone. He heard another voice, a male voice, and opened his eyes to see his wife coming upstairs to their bedroom with another individual. He remained still and silent, carefully listening to their conversation. His wife was talking on her mobile phone, and they were both giggling. Jake found this strange and thought he was dreaming until Jake realized that she was talking to Shelley, his brother's wife. He was instantly brought back to reality when he heard what she was saying. "Oh, Shelley, I'm with him right now. Thank you for setting up this date. I hope you're right about his size. I just hope it doesn't hurt as much as it did for you last week." The previous week, he had said that he would call her tomorrow to set up another date. "I'll give you a full report later," he said. "I have to go." His migraine intensified, and he was overcome with a sense of helplessness. He was acutely aware of their lack of awareness of his presence in the adjacent living room, where he was situated in a chair that was partially obscured from view. Despite his secluded position, he felt a surge of indignation, which only exacerbated his headache. The emotional turbulence he was experiencing, stemming from both the migraine and the unfolding events, manifested as nausea and a sense of heartbreak, accompanied by the sudden onset of tears. He loved and cherished her, yet she had just torn their marriage apart. He sat in silent contemplation as his heart broke anew with each passing moment. He listened as the man he had once known as his wife's husband described the physical attributes of his wife in explicit detail. Jake was falling into a black hole from which there was no escape. He heard the couple lie down on the bed and listened as his wife told this man, whom she was now referring to as Blake, how big he was and how she wasn't used to handling something so large. Wondering if he would fit, Jake's anger grew as he heard his soon-to-be ex-wife describe the physical attributes of her new lover. His wife was engaged in sexual activity with Blake, displaying a level of enthusiasm that he had not observed in many years. Indeed, she had not engaged in sexual activity with him for years, often expressing dissatisfaction with their sexual relationship. He exercised considerable restraint in waiting for an opportune moment to intervene in their intimate encounter. He did not have to wait long, however, as they had only engaged in sexual activity for a few minutes before he decided it was time to intervene. He suppressed his pain and anger and stood up. He arose and summoned the strength to confront the two lovers in the marital bed. He was not compelled to be silent, as the lovers were vocalizing their pleasure. Linda was gazing into Blake's eyes, imploring him to intensify his actions, when she observed Jake standing adjacent to her. At that moment, she was unfaithful to him in their bed. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, attempting to dislodge Blake from her body. Her protests were ignored by Blake, who proceeded to continue his actions while she looked pleadingly into Jake's eyes and shouted for him to stop. However, it was too late, as the pain in his head and heart was already too intense. Jake then proceeded to walk to his nightstand, take out a loaded Glock G45, and shoot Blake straight in the left temple. As a result, Blake immediately collapsed onto Linda, who was lying in shock with Blake's body on top of her. In his eyes, Jake looked at Linda and said, "I loved you with all my heart, and you took away everything I cherished. My heart is broken." He then fired the next bullet into her head and watched as the life drained from her body. The two lifeless lovers now lay together on the stained sheets. Jake picked up the phone and called his brother Robbie. He spoke in a terrifyingly calm voice for someone who had just committed a double murder. "Murder." Robbie answered and said, "Hey bro." Robbie, listen carefully. "I just caught Linda in bed with this guy, Blake, who I think is the new tennis instructor. I heard her talking to Shelly before I walked in on them in my bed. From what I heard, I think Shelly might be involved with him too. You might want to keep an eye on her. I am not joking. I do not wish for you to experience the same distress I have endured. It is imperative that you ascertain whether your partner is unfaithful to you, given the circumstances. I am unable to tolerate this situation any longer. I wish for you to be aware of my affection for you and my regret for what has transpired." Robbie then proceeded to take his own life. Before doing so, he placed a call to 911, informing them of the double murder-suicide. He ensured that the authorities had the correct address. Jake was seated in the migraine chair, holding the gun, with his head resting against the nearby wall. When Robbie arrived 20 minutes later, the scene was horrific. A year later, I learned that Robbie and Jake was my older brother. This event occurred a year ago and was the most traumatic experience of my life. Profoundly changed my world. Losing my older brother because of his unfaithful wife was difficult for everyone, especially for me. He was my best friend, and I loved him dearly. Upon learning of Linda's infidelity and subsequent role in the murders and suicide, she became a figure of intense disapproval within the close-knit community. I continued to grapple with the emotional distress caused by my brother's passing. I chose to remain silent about Jake's statements and instead kept a close watch on my wife. After hearing Jake's remarks shortly before his suicide, I developed a sense of paranoia and hired a top. I engaged the services of a security company to install a variety of monitoring devices and software. The installation process took 2 weeks, after which monitoring began. If Shelly was involved in Linda's infidelity, I wanted to uncover the extent of her own unfaithfulness and act accordingly. My pain never subsided, and I became obsessed with finding out how my wife was implicated in this matter. The frequency of sexual intercourse between Shelly and me declined significantly after Jake's suicide. After receiving confirmation that Shell was cheating on me, I became angry and relentless, driven by a desire for revenge for both her betrayal and her role in Jake's suicide. Over the course of the year, the security firm provided me with numerous hours of video and audio recordings of Shelly and her lover watching her sleep with another man. This was a painful experience, but it also led to a deeper understanding of the nature of their relationship. My affection for her diminished considerably. I was particularly distressed by certain remarks Shell made to her lover. I found myself repeatedly questioning her rationale. Why did she remain in the relationship? She had previously stated that the physical intimacy was unfulfilling and that she did not engage in the same activities with him as she did with me. I was perplexed by her continued involvement. Why not simply terminate the relationship and move in with me? She had mentioned that he did not engage in romantic activities with her. Did she believe he was unaware of our relationship? It seemed unlikely, given that he was still grieving the death of his brother. I am experiencing depressive symptoms, and I am not pressuring him. I do not require sexual intimacy with him, as long as I have you. Listen, I love him and I will never leave him. I have informed you since we began this 2 years ago that my feelings for him are not romantic in nature. I enjoy being with you, just as I enjoyed being with Blake. You were the most significant influence on my sexual experiences. I miss him, and I am still coming to terms with his passing. I also miss him. I am still processing the loss of your eccentric brother. In conclusion, it can be stated that the aforementioned individual exhibited behaviors that could be perceived as erratic and irrational. It is therefore recommended that further investigation be conducted into this matter. It is evident that Shelley shot him. I hope your husband is not as irrational as his brother. I am keen to avoid a similar occurrence in our own lives. Do not fret, my dear. I would never bring you to our house in the same way that she did. We are in a satisfactory position and we will never be discovered. I am determined to prevent that from happening. It would cause immense distress to Robbie, and I have no desire to harm him. That is why I will never abandon him. You will have to be content with me. I can accept that. Robbie discovered her infidelity. He formulated a plan. Shelley was sleeping with Jared Roberts, the assistant tennis coach who was promoted to head coach after Blake's untimely death a few weeks later. Robbie got the opportunity he had been waiting for. Jared was invited to a banquet celebrating the country club's award for the best tennis program in the area. He called Shelley and told her about the banquet. She was thrilled at the prospect of staying in a hotel and spending the entire night with him. Conveniently, Robbie informed Shelley that he had a business trip coming up, which was not an unusual occurrence. The dates coincided with the banquet. Robbie wanted to ensure that Shelley had sufficient opportunity to act unilaterally. Indeed, the following day, she contacted Jared and informed him of the positive developments. She successfully persuaded him to extend the trip, staying for 3 nights at a hotel in Orlando. She also promised that she would captivate him. The prospect of engaging in an affair with a high-class mistress for 3 days seemed appealing to Jared, and he agreed. In the following week, they discussed the plan further by telephone and in written messages. Shelley suggested that they transform this trip into a pretend honeymoon. She informed Jared that she wished to be his new bride and wife for the duration of the 3 days. To make the plan more realistic, she even proposed purchasing a new wedding ring for the occasion and booking a honeymoon suite at the hotel. They would tell the staff that they were newlyweds to draw attention and experience the thrill. She even informed Jared that she wished it were real and that he was. The texts revealed a depth of emotion and a complexity of motives that fueled Robbie's desire for revenge. He was driven by a sense of triumph, anticipating the moment when he would see her face crumble. Shelley's preoccupation with fitness was evident. She even waxed her legs a week before Robbie's departure. Her intention was to surprise her husband by telling him she did it for him, to spice things up. However, her true motivation was her upcoming honeymoon. Robbie was not impressed and wanted nothing to do with his cheating soon-to-be ex-wife. The wife was planning to spend 3 days with Jared as his wife in a pretend honeymoon. This would be her first extended time alone with another man since she got married 10 years ago. She and Jared thought it would be romantic. She bought several sexy outfits, including bikinis and lingerie, for their rendezvous and planned everything out. Robbie was stunned and envious of the effort she was putting into this guy. He had once felt love for her. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, leaving him with no remaining affection for her. It was the end of their relationship, and he was now forced to endure the pain of rejection on his way to the hotel. He called Shelley, but only reached her voicemail. He left a message expressing his love for her and his intention to see her in 10 days. Shelley called him back an hour later to ensure he was not suspicious. She had to complete her sexual encounter with Jared. In a third instance that day, prior to contacting Robbie, she informed him of her love and that the children were at the residence of a friend. She stated that she would order pizza upon their return and that they would watch movies throughout the night. She expressed her longing for him and stated that she loved him more than anything and could not wait for his return. Robbie experienced a sense of nausea and disbelief at the ease with which she lied. Upon his arrival at the hotel, he proceeded to the valet and handed over the keys to his vehicle. He then inquired with the concierge as to whether Mr. and Mrs. Roberts had checked in earlier. His anger intensified when the concierge confirmed that the newlyweds, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, had checked into their honeymoon suite the previous day. He then contacted the hotel's restaurants to ascertain whether they had reservations for the evening. The main restaurant confirmed that they had made a reservation for 6 o'clock. The time was 12 a.m. On the evening in question, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts were observed by Mr. Smith from a strategic vantage point. Throughout their dinner, Mr. Smith remained inconspicuous when they were both leaving, having already positioned himself near the entrance. The plan was to make it appear as though he were entering the restaurant at the same time they were leaving. Mr. Smith observed the newlyweds holding hands after they had having completed their meal. The newlyweds were about to depart. The timing was optimal for the next phase of the plan. He positioned himself at the precise moment they were exiting the restaurant. He deliberately turned the corner to bump into them at that exact moment, resulting in Robbie colliding with Shell's companion and almost knocking him over. Everyone turned to look, and they both stumbled slightly but regained their balance. Smiling, Robbie stepped back and spoke to him, expressing his regret for the incident. He then noticed Shelley and stood there with his mouth open in a state of shock and surprise. She stood there in her revealing dress, wishing she could run and hide. Her worst fear had come true, and she froze with wide eyes, completely stunned. "Caught?" she said, her voice trembling. "Is that you? What are you doing here?" Robbie then took a few steps back and regarded his wife with a look of astonishment. He was taken aback by her appearance. She was wearing a very short dress with a deep neckline and no bra, along with nylon stockings, CFM pumps, and glamorous makeup and hair. He found himself wishing that she would dress like that for him. He thought to himself, "Wow, that's quite an outfit. I've never seen you look so." She was dressed in a sexually provocative manner, and he was perplexed. "Who is this?" he inquired. "Shelley," she replied, realizing she was caught. She attempted to compose herself and said, "Robbie, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Jacksonville." "Well, plans changed. You know how it is with my job," she said. "But what the hell is going on here? You're dressed like a mistress in a sexy dress in a manner that suggests an extramarital encounter with a male companion. Let us proceed to the lobby and engage in discourse." Robbie spoke with great urgency, grasping her arm firmly as they entered the lobby. "When we conversed earlier, you stated that you would be remaining at home with your offspring. What is your purpose in being here, and with whom are you on a social visit?" "This is not what I anticipated, nor is it what I believe." He repeated this twice, his voice conveying a sense of bewilderment as he gazed at her hand. She then proceeded to enter the establishment. "Where are your wedding rings?" she inquired. "Have you been unfaithful to me?" she asked, looking at her ring finger, where the large diamond ring was absent and replaced by a thin gold band that her lover had given her for their pretend honeymoon weekend. She was overcome with a desire to flee the scene, but she was unable to do so. "Robbie, I love you," she said. "This gesture means nothing. It is meaningless that you are not wearing your wedding ring." "Your wedding ring? Why are you wearing another gold ring? Observe your attire. You have never dressed like this for me. You departed town with a man wearing a new gold ring instead of your wedding ring. Are you leaving me for him?" "That is what it appears to be, but I am unsure. You say it is not what I think, but it sure looks like something is going on here." He continued to apply pressure, enjoying every second of her confusion. Robbie turned to the tennis player and inquired in a firm voice, "Please explain the situation." Jelly looked at Jared with apprehension, uncertain of how he would respond. "Calm down," he said. "As your wife mentioned, there is nothing going on. She accompanied me to the hotel banquet to support your country club. She is merely doing me a favor." Smiling, Robbie attempted to conceal his amusement at the individual's absurd assertion. "I see. She's merely extending a courtesy and is present solely as your date for the ceremony." He then posed a question. "Are you occupying the same room at this hotel?" He urged them to be truthful, as he intended to inspect both rooms before departing. Both individuals gazed at the floor, neither willing to speak. Finally, Shelley spoke up. "My dear, I love you. Please do not be distressed. It was merely..." The couple had been together for several days, during which time they had engaged in sexual intercourse. Despite this, she was still wearing her own wedding rings. She was also wearing a new gold ring. He was not wearing his wedding rings. He was also not wearing his wedding ring. She was on a honeymoon. She was already aware of the situation. She was pretending to be his wife. She was already aware of the answer to his question. She was shocked. He did not relent. She was trying to convince him that her infidelity could be explained by a number of factors. Angrily, Robbie demanded that she answer the question. He then proceeded to go to the front desk to obtain answers, urging her to start talking. He then asked whether she was staying in the same room with her husband. She replied with tears streaming down her face, confirming that she was indeed having sex with him. He then asked her whether she was pretending to be his wife. She replied, "It's not what you think, baby. Answer the question." In a tearful and embarrassed voice, she said, "Yes, all right, I understand. I'll leave you and your new husband alone. I'm going home and will contact a lawyer in the morning. We're done." "He is a tennis-playing jerk," she said. No, baby, please. I love you, and you don't understand. I don't want to divorce you. You are my husband, and I cannot lose you. Please try to understand. I don't love him, It was just something I needed. Please understand. No, I don't understand. All right, I'll give you one more chance to explain it to me, so I can understand. Tell me why I should tolerate my wife sleeping with another man. Furthermore, she implored him to comprehend that the liaison was merely intended to last a few days, as she was in need of sexual gratification. She asserted that her feelings towards him were not romantic, and that her sole affection was directed towards him. She then asked him to consider that she should be able to accept his sexual involvement with another woman for a brief period, as a form of recreation. At this point, Shelley became visibly distressed, sobbing uncontrollably. She came to realize the gravity of her actions and the extent of their impact on her marriage. There was no valid rationale provided. The only recourse available to her was to implore him to comprehend her necessity for sexual intimacy with another individual. Robbie, I am profoundly remorseful. I was misguided. I did not consider the implications of my actions. I was driven by a need for sexual gratification, not by genuine affection. I recognize that my actions may appear reprehensible, but I am committed to working through this challenging period of silence. The individual known as the tennis guy began to exhibit signs of irritation and impatience, ultimately interjecting his opinion. Hey man, back off a bit. Can't you see how upset she is? Robbie turned to Jared and gave him a piercing look. Shut up and get out of my sight. Leave me and my real wife alone. Isn't that enough for today? Please go to our room. I will join you shortly. She angrily pushed his hand away, indicating that she had no desire to interact with him at that moment. Robbie found this situation amusing. It seemed that she had lost interest in her romantic partner, and he appeared to take pleasure in this turn of events. He continued to tease Shelley while she sat there, sobbing. Do not be discourteous to your new husband. I must be detracting from the quality of your honeymoon. We are both aware that you desire this outcome, and that you no longer wish to be with me. We are both aware that you do not love me. Otherwise you would not have been unfaithful to me and demonstrated such disrespect. Jared departed, leaving them alone. Please remain with me. Tell me how long you have been with him, she implored, her eyes conveying a sense of urgency. Have you ever disrespected me in your conversations with him? Have you ever spoken poorly of me to him? Did you ever speak ill of me or criticize me when you were together or during sex? No, I would never do that. I love you so much. You mean everything to me. You have to believe me. Let's just leave. Let's go home right now and be together. Robbie took out his phone and turned off the audio recording. Then he proceeded to play a series of audio recordings, spanning a period of 6 months, which had been previously recorded. The first recording revealed that the subject had been engaged in an extramarital affair for a period of 2 years. The second recording prompted the subject to provide an explanation regarding a particular incident. The audio file was of high quality, and the subject's voice was clearly audible. The third recording expressed a negative sentiment. Audio file 3. Despite the lack of sexual attraction, the narrator remains in the relationship due to the stability and financial security provided by the partner. Audio file 4. The narrator's primary motivation for staying in the relationship is the partner's role as a provider and father. Audio file 5. The narrator expresses admiration for the partner's sexual performance, suggesting a discrepancy between their own expectations and those of their husband. Audio file 6. The narrator expresses love for the partner. Audio file 7. Sighs and how you turn me on. Audio file 8. I belong to you, not him. This is why the relationship is over. Shelley, I have reached the limit of my tolerance for your dishonesty. I am aware that you have been unfaithful to me for at least the past 2 years. What you are unaware of is that Jay called me the night he shot his wife and your former lover. I have been privy to your conversations with Lindo, in which you expressed admiration for Blake's physical attributes. I was aware of your infidelity, your dishonesty, and your lack of respect for me. I wanted to ascertain the extent of your deceit, and it became evident that your actions and statements were designed to convey that I was merely a source of financial support for you. Furthermore, you are a father to the children. You may cease this pretense and deceit, as I possess recordings of all your communications. I am aware of your sentiments regarding me, our sexual relationship, and your assessment of my abilities as a partner. I am privy to all of this information, and it will soon become public knowledge unless you comply with my demands. The brother's wife was encouraged by her brother-in-law to become as corrupt as he is, and he bears some responsibility for the tragic day she met and subsequently became involved with Blake. He even set up their date because of his actions and deceit. Both she and my brother are now deceased. I am truly sorry for my role in this tragedy. Please forgive me. Head in her hands and sobbing uncontrollably, I am certain you are wondering why I showed up here tonight. It was not an accidental occurrence. I was aware of your plans for this week. What you had planned was so implausible that I felt compelled to see it with my own eyes. I even knew about your plans to play the role of husband. Furthermore, I was forced to witness your role-playing as a husband and wife on this trip, which only served to erase me from your life. I must admit that it was painful to hear, and it hurt more than you can imagine. Shelley continued to cry. You broke your vows, destroyed our marriage, and disrespected our children. What's worse, you were involved in the affair and the death of my sister. In conclusion, it is evident that the aforementioned individual has transgressed the vows they took upon their marriage, thereby destroying the sanctity of their union and disrespecting their children. Furthermore, their actions have resulted in the demise of their sister, which they have given the circumstances. It is unlikely that reconciliation is possible. It would be inadvisable for you to return home after your honeymoon weekend. It would be preferable for you to stay at your mother's house. It would be beneficial for you to inform your family of your actions, as they may inquire about the reason for our separation. I will be reasonable, but you will sign the divorce papers without if you contest the agreement. I will present all the evidence I have to everyone, including your parents. The children are old enough to decide who they want to live with. After we have explained your infidelity, lies, and deceit, I am confident that they will choose to live with me. What is particularly distressing about this situation is that I loved you with all my heart and wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. When Jake informed me about you, I was initially skeptical. I am compelled to believe it, yet I have learned the terrible truth, and my heart is broken. You will have to live with that guilt and loss of love forever. We will never be together again. Robbie stood up, left Shelley sobbing, and drove home. I never came to terms with my brother's death. I was unable to find peace through avenging my wife. 5 years later, I met a woman in a cafe, and we became close friends. I never remarried because I could never trust another woman the way I once did. We dated. Following the dissolution of her marriage, Shelley experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for a year. She was subsequently unable to return to her hometown, where she had been known for her involvement in the deaths of Jake and Linda and her infidelity towards her family. Shelley lost custody of her children and was permitted to see them only once every few weeks.